while he was up there, he decided to look for some kind of a pennant that he could sell in his sundry store here. They showed him the types of pennants they had. They had like the Yale Bulldogs, schools from up east. And he said, well, what is your mascot? Well, he hadn't even thought about that. He didn't really have it. We had no mascot. And his son was with him, the Virginia student. His son said, well, alligator. He said, alligator's native to the state of Florida. So they made some pennants and some banners and so forth. And when they shipped them down here in the fall of 1908 for him to sell in his store, they had put the alligators on there, and the alligators were orange, and the pennants and banners blue. And he had not picked that out. It was purely accidental. That's just what the people at the factory put on.
And from that simple twist of fate, an orange and blue revolution was born. Unlike today's brutal SEC schedule, the early years were made up of mostly athletic clubs, with a few college teams like Rollins, Mercer, and Stetson mixed in. Heading into the 1920 season, the Gators were 22-20-1 overall, and not considered a serious threat. Things changed when Army ROTC Major James A. Van Fleet was asked to join the coaching staff, first as an assistant and then as head coach in 1923. Putting Florida on the map was his primary mission.
Gave Florida its first really national schedule. They played Harvard at Harvard. Harvard was a powerhouse back then. They played at Army, which was Van Fleet's alma mater. They played Army very well. They played at Texas, another national power, and tied them out there. And they played Georgia Tech, which was another national power.
I think he tied them 2 years in a row, 7-7. But Georgia Tech was one of the toughest teams in the nation to beat at the time, and nobody considered Florida even a worthy opponent. But after Van Fleet was here, that pretty much turned around.
So Van Fleet kind of put Florida football on the map nationally.
He was a guy who led by example. He never would have his soldiers go do obstacle courses or probably things on the football field that he couldn't do himself. And that's probably the most important aspect of any leader, is that you are able to lead by example. I think Gerald Van Fleet does hold a prominent position in the history of not only the military and in the Army, but in the history of Florida football. And we still teach our cadets today in ROTC that will to win is not a football slogan. That will to win is a General Van Fleet slogan, which was used both on the football field and on the battlefield.
Today, Van Fleet Hall stands in the shadow of Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, a fitting testament to this great American war hero whose will to win attitude took Florida football from obscurity to feared opponent. During the 1920s, Florida would compile a 64-25-8 record, the best 10-year record until the 1960s. One team that stands out from that decade was the 1928 Gators. Led by head coach Charles Bachman, the Gators would lead the nation in scoring, outscoring their opponents 336-44. Starring the Phantom Four backfield of Clyde Cannonball Crabtree, Carl Brumbaugh, Rainey Cawthorn, and Royce Goodbread, the Gators were undefeated going into their last game of the year. But on a wet, cold day in Knoxville, they fell 13-12 on 2 missed extra points. Many at the time felt that if Florida had won that game, they would have been on their way to the Rose Bowl to play for a national title. A key two-way performer on that Gator squad was Dale Van Sickle. A gifted multi-sport athlete from Gainesville, Van Sickle was Florida's first All-American and the first to be named to the College Football Hall of Fame. Florida football was making a statement, and the Gator Nation was ready to take the next step. And a true visionary was in the right place at the right time to figuratively and literally pour lower the foundation for Florida football. That visionary was President John J. Tigard.
John J. Tigard became president in 1928, succeeding Albert Murphy, and he brought a new dimension to the university.
He understood athletics. He had been head football coach at the University of Kentucky, and he determined that Florida had to have a stadium, a permanent stadium for football, if they were going to progress and amount to anything in that sport. So he picked out the site of where the Florida field is now, which he said was a Great Depression next to the old gym.
Tigard's description turned out to be an ironic metaphor, considering the financial hardships the country was about to endure. Those hardships affected every segment of society. Constructing a new stadium with public funds was not an option. Determined, Tigard recruited friends and local business owners to raise the funds needed to build the stadium, thus forming the University Athletic Association.
And they got that stadium built for $118,000. They started in April of 1930. It was finished in October of 1930. It was a stadium that started at ground level at row 32 and went down and dug it out, had 80 men and a bunch of mules, and that's how they built the stadium.
With the new stadium in place, Tigard set his sights on making sure Florida would have a league of its own. The Southeastern Conference is one of America's premier football conferences, winning 12 national championships. The loyalty of the fan base is like no other in the country, and passionate rivalries are played week in and week out. None more intense than the annual Florida-Georgia Showdown in Jacksonville.
You couldn't sleep the night before the game, and it wasn't because you were nervous, it was because wherever we stayed in Jacksonville, the Bulldog fans found us and would do everything they could to stay up partying and screaming and trying to keep us awake all night.
When I was playing here, these people, they'd come up to me and say, look, I don't care, you guys lose every single game this year, just beat the Bulldogs for me.
Spurrier took the job. His number one goal was to find a way to beat Georgia because Florida had lost home for so many years in a row. Well, we turned that tide.
And whose idea was it to play at a neutral site? You guessed it, John J. Tigard.
They moved that game to Jacksonville in 1933 because fans of both schools could easily get there by train, and it turned out right. I mean, the stadium sold out the first year, and from there on, that it was held in Jacksonville. And traditional games, the following year, the Notre Dame Southern Cal game, which was the big national rivalry at that time, lost like 50% of their gate because of the hard times. So Tigard again had a great vision along with the leaders of Jacksonville at that time.
With Tigard solidifying Florida's football future, he then set out to change the face of college football. Tigard was bothered that schools were paying players under the table to play football and demanded the NCAA do something about it.
Well, he talked his fellow SEC presidents into backing that, and it was a rocky road for a while, but they did get the NCAA then to approve the grant and aid scholarship. So Tigard had great vision all along where intercollegiate athletics should be.
It's hard to imagine that John Tigard could have seen that his vision for the SEC and for the University of Florida would not only be alive and well more than 60 years later, but flourishing into a global Gator nation. The Great Depression, and was threatened by a war that loomed on the horizon. But the Florida program continued to grow, producing many great players during those hard times. Tailback Walter Mayberry, Florida's first all-SEC player in 1937, punted, played defensive back, and held the single-season interception record until the 1960s. Mayberry would make the ultimate sacrifice for his country as a decorated fighter pilot for the Marine Corps. The 1940s featured Forrest Fergie Ferguson, a first-team All-American in 1941.
Along past that time, the big Fergie Ferguson. Fergie was batted out on the 11-yard line.
A gifted athlete, Ferguson was the state heavyweight boxing champion and a national AAU javelin champion. Ferguson was also a hero on the battlefield, being awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for gallantry in World War II. Because of his contributions on and off the field, the Fergie Ferguson Award has been given annually to a deserving Florida player since 1954, the year Fergie died of wounds he suffered in World War II. Many other Florida football players were dedicated to the service of their country and left college to defend America in World War II. Bob Gilbert played basketball and football at Florida in 1941 and 42. Before leaving for Europe and the war.
I went into combat with the 104th Timberwolf Division in Germany. We went into Holland first and then back into Germany, and on November 29th, 1943, I was captured at Eschweiler by an SS battalion and was sent on to interior Germany and spent 6 months in a German POW camp.
The savage battle for Berlin, so long feared by the German people, was begun.
We were liberated by the Russians in May, and I came back to Florida, to Fort Myers, my home, and then decided to go back to the University of Florida and went up there, and we played in 1946.
First of all, if you were lucky enough to survive it, come home alive, number one, and number two, come home uninjured. Guys lost arms and legs and those types of things. So I think the first thing you would be thinking is, man, I'm extremely fortunate, I'm extremely elated that I'm able to go back onto the football field.
When the veterans came back, they had, of course, most of them hadn't played football in 3 or 4 years. They'd been in service, and they combined with guys out of high school, and they were the Florida football team there in the years in the late 40s.
I came right out of high school, so I was 18 years old, and then of course there were guys there that were 23, 24 years old. So here I was a kid playing with men.
The first year after the war ended, Florida fielded a team made up of returning war veterans and young, inexperienced players. The Gators proceeded to lose 13 straight games, but a bond was formed between the players that would produce something special.
Losing really does do something to you, especially when you lose everything the first year, when you know that you're a much better ball club than you were.
I know Mayor Wolf was trying to make the most out of it, but it was tough.
Some newspaper guy, I guess, from that era dubbed them the Golden Era. Only they called it error, E-R-R-O-R, the Golden Era. The Golden Era, and the adversity of the times and what they'd gone through in World War II bonded this group together.
The guy playing next to you was like the guy being in the foxhole with you. It's the closest thing to actual combat there is, because one lets down on one side, then the whole thing goes. That's what's so important. So I think the most important thing that the younger kids had to learn and did eventually learn was the idea that I've got to depend on my teammate and my teammate is depending on me. Mostly that group in 46 to 48 grew to be almost like brothers.
And when they graduated from the University of Florida, they started having a reunion starting in the 1950s that they had every year. I think they still have it to this day with those that remain.
We didn't win many ball games, but the teammates that you had, they stay with you for life.
and John Tiger before them. These band of brothers from the golden era helped lay the groundwork for stadium improvements that would transform Florida Field. The stadium holds magical moments from every decade, but it's far different now than when it was first built. Florida Field began to take shape in the early 50s as Coach Bob Woodruff was brought in to serve as football coach and athletic director. Woodruff would lead the Gators to their first ever bowl game in 1952, a 14-13 win over Tulsa. Woodruff was also able to reorganize Gator boosters and establish new scholarship contributions, while also providing funds that were used to expand Florida Field. The expansion included adding 11,000 seats to the west side, a new press box, and bleachers in the south end zone. The improvements increased stadium capacity to over 40,000. The pace picked up in the 1960s when legendary head coach Ray Graves would lead an effort to expand seating to 62,000. Graves also created the ultimate team environment in Yon Hall.
That was the first challenge, to build the additional to the east ends with a dormitory for the athletes.
Graves felt that the players needed unique housing to balance academic life with football. It proved to be popular with both the coaches and players.
Not only did we play in there, but we lived in there for about 3 years. Lived in the swamp.
Back in the day, they had all the fraternities and stuff, but we kept saying we were Yon Phi Yon. It was just, it was a group of guys. You had the basketball players, you had everybody on this side, the football players. I think that all of us as athletes, became really close because we were right there with each other.
I enjoyed that atmosphere more than anything because all your teammates were there, the camaraderie among your teammates.
Guys were close and you lived together and spent tons of time together.
That has a lot to do with the success that we've had, our team. That last crew that came out of Yon Hall is just kind of how tight-knit we were there, all living in that same, housing unit.
I think Yon Hall was really something I was really, really proud of, and I knew it meant so much to the program.
With the east side stands and Yon Hall completed, an idea for a south end zone complex was initiated, and in 1982 it became a reality. Coach Charlie Pell received support from several Gator faithful, including Ben Hill Griffin and Wendy's founder Dave Thomas, to build a showcase locker room, training room, and weight room. Those improvements helped catch the attention of a new class of recruits, including a soft-spoken running back from Pensacola.
When you think of Emmitt Smith, he had the best balance of any back I've ever seen. And he had great vision.
Somehow he was able to understand his momentum and their momentum enough to where he carried 2 or 3 guys with him, another 5 yards.
Well, I've told a lot of people stories about after the handing the ball off to Emmitt and, situations where there wasn't a hole and all of a sudden he'd bounce into the hole and there'd be a linebacker up here and all of a sudden you'd see him slide one way and the linebacker would fall on his face.
The objective is not to get hit. And I think I took a lot of pride in trying to avoid the big hit.
I was at the SEC meeting, and several of the sports writers from other states came around and said, "Tell us about this Emmitt Smith." I said, "Well, I've never seen him play, but I'll tell you what I know about him." And I told them that he's 5'10" and 190 pounds and runs a 4.7. And Gordon Pettis, who played halfback at Alabama, the head of the SEC officials, was standing there at the time, and he said, "All y'all that want to write about Emmitt Smith, go back to last year's newspaper, because his name's not ever going to be in the paper in the Southeastern Conference, that he's not good enough."
I know Coach Hall wanted to sort of bring him on slowly. The first 2 games, we hardly used him, and then going into the 3rd week, Coach Hall said it's time for him to start and see what he can do.
great day. Offensive line did a great job of blocking. And I ended up breaking his freshman school record that day. Rushed for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns and beat the Tide.
After the game, I looked over at Gordon Pettis. He was sitting down in the way, and I said, Gordon, you still think his name's not ever going to be in the newspaper? He said, his name's going to be in the newspaper.
From that moment on, you knew we had a special football player. And it was great to see him that freshman year do the things that he was able to do as a true freshman at a major college like the University of Florida. As a kid from Mayo who grew up and had to walk on here to University of Florida, I always look back and say, you know what, I was a part of some great players in my career.
Everyone wanted to see who was going to be the next Gator great. But not everyone could get a seat. Another expansion was needed. In 1991, the expansion of the north end zone would completely enclose the stadium, transforming it into one of the loudest stadiums in the SEC, if not the country. Skyboxes, club seating, bleacher seating, and the popular touchdown terrace also made it one of America's most fan-friendly stadiums. The only thing missing was a nickname.
I think I got a letter from someone that was suggesting names for the stadium. You know, some people had Death Valley and all these other nicknames for their stadium. And I'd heard somebody mention Swamp. I wasn't the first one to come up with it. I guess I was the first one to use it in a strong sense.
I had read a statement by John J. Tigert about the origination of this stadium. And he had called it a Great Depression, and he also called it a swamp area. And I showed that to Steve, and we were both sitting there, and he said, swamp area? He said, the swamp. He said, that's it. And immediately he said, where only Gators get out alive.
Only Gators get out alive. I remember one of our marketing guys at Florida there in the early 90s said, that'll never catch on. That's not going to work. And I said, well, I think a little nickname lets our players be a little bit more inspired and, feel good about defending the swamp or whatever. And so I kept calling it that, and next thing I knew, all the players were calling that, and all the sports writers, and all the fans.
And in 2003, the most recent addition to the swamp was completed. 14 additional skyboxes, club seating, and a new press box bumped the seating capacity up to nearly 90,000.
You know, where the stadium is today and where it was when I first got here, and I think it's a source of pride for a lot of Gators because it's certainly one of the finest stadiums in the country. I think it helps you recruit talented student athletes, helps you attract quality coaches. The Swamp, Florida Field, Gunnar Griffin Stadium, and there's no better place. And there is a lot of pride for all of us to see how it has changed and how much it means to this university and to this program.
Those who've seen the stadium expand marvel at its growth. Those who've played and coached here understand the swamp has a life of its own.
The stadium, the swamp, the atmosphere, it's truly second to none. It is a very, very special place to play.
Dimensions of the stadium, trap noise, better than most.
Here they're right on top of you. It's extremely hot, humid, deafening sounds the entire game.
Over 80,000 of your fans, your buddies are right there. Might as well be sitting on your shoulder, just.
When you go into the swamp, that's different.
Gator fans really don't need any help getting loud. They come to the stadium loud. They come, ready to go, amped up.
When the swamp was cranking, it gets cranking. And I'm on defense, so we want them to crank, and they go as loud as they possibly can, so we can't hear anything.
I made sure I took the headsets off about 4 or 5 minutes and just watched the student body. Truly saw the most dynamic arena in college football.
Certainly, the swamp has become legendary as probably one of the toughest places to play in the country.
I fight with the coach. It's like, no, you need to go out there and flip the coin. Son, you send somebody else. Send Danny to flip the coin. You know, send another captain to flip the coin. I'm gonna run out of the tunnel.
You're sitting there in the tunnel and sweat coming off your forehead, and you're just getting ready. You're pumped up as much as you can be.
Standing next to Jim Watson, offensive lineman for us, and Coach Red was nuts anyway. So I mean, he's freaking out, you know, getting ready to go, feeling all the same emotions, and he just looks at Jim Watson, headbutts Jim Watson. Jim Watson's got his helmet on, and blood just starts gushing out of Coach Red's face.
You know, you got Doc Lucky holding off the charge, you know, and you're waiting to get out. It's like a Coke bottle that you've shaken up.
You talking about college football atmosphere on steroids. It's basically that.
And he drops those arms in here and just boom, everybody just comes flying out.
I remember running onto the field and remember thinking, I'm not even sure my feet are touching the ground. Really, I could have done anything at that point.
When you know you're representing them, you know, the 70,000 that are sitting there in their orange and blue, and you're running out and that fight song is for you, that's a totally different deal.
It was like walking into a cartoon because everywhere around you was these bright orange, blue, white colors, and it was like you walked into another planet, and a planet where people were crazy and crazy for you.
Sends chills down your spine whenever you run around that tunnel with 90-something thousand fans screaming.
The fans are going crazy, they're going wild. And you kind of feel the ground shaking up under your feet just a little bit.
Only the Eagles get out of it. Coaches and players agree the atmosphere at the Swamp is created by one driving force.
If you're a college football fan, win, lose, or draw, that's your team.
I'm kind of a nut, you know, when it comes in. I get so excited and...
Passionate Gator fans.
Yeah?
It's a great bonding experience. We love coming up here together.
We've been fans forever.
Yeah.
They're not like other universities, fair weather. You know, they're loyal, they're committed, you know, and they'll show up. If we play in a school of the blind, they'll show up, you know, in a big way.
Is merged by reason of the fact we're Gator fans. And a Gator fan is a loyal fan, no matter where he is.
We were the only Gator club in a communist country, and we were in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Gator club. So we all Gator. Go Gator! Go Gator! That's touchdown. The only doing is a touchdown. Go to the touchdown. All right. That's a Gitmo Gator Club original.
I think it's just automatically having, 95,000 best friends.
The atmosphere that just overwhelms you.
Everybody just sort of becomes one big blob of orange and blue, and they're all excited and pumped up.
90,000 people coming together for 3 hours as one.
Kid painting his body over here, you know, from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, to an alumni sitting here with, you know, with a dress suit on and diamond earring. She's as big of a fan as this one.
I think every coach has said that the Gator fans are the best. They are.
We're the best fans in America, and they are a key part of our success.
Passion and intensity is second to none here in Florida. And that's, you know, it's more regional, you're in the South, and they truly live and die by Florida football. And that's not true of many places.
Urban Meyer's desire to strengthen the bond between players and fans brought about a new tradition in the Gator Walk. Little did the team and coaches know that thousands of the Gator Nation would jam University Avenue to kick off a new era in Florida football.
To get off the bus and actually walk through the fans before a game, it was something else.
The Gator Walk was a hit, but Meyer wasn't done leaving his mark on the Swamp faithful. And now these new traditions live on with a game day experience that is unmistakably old school.
That started in 1923 as a dance number. And there was a band, a local band here, Rabbit Robbins was the guy that was the head of it. And they played at the Elks Club for fraternity dances. And one of them wrote We Are the Boys Move Florida as a dance number. And it got to be popular, and when a true homecoming started here in the early 20s, they played that as part of the homecoming, and people just kind of took it up as a pep song, it's a loyalty song, and it went from there.
But to be able to feel it and to see 360 all around you, and all these people having fun and their arms around each other, one great big chain that is the Gator Nation.
Of the millions of Gator fans dedicated to the orange and blue tradition, one fan stands alone.
He told me years and years ago he was retiring.
Kept being these loud noises all over. I thought we had a problem.
He's never really retired. He's going to show up for big games, which every game turns out to be a big game, looks like.
In 1949, a friend of mine here had some extra tickets, and he said, George, would you like to go to Gainesville to a football game? I said, sure, Orman, I'll go with you. The crowd then was only 50-some thousand, but the team was terrible. They were just awful, getting beat by everybody. We were the whipping dogs of the SEC. At the first of the game, when the announcer said, here come the Gators, they'd run out on the field and everybody would boo. And they'd announce the coach and everybody would boo. And I said, good gracious alive, what's everybody booing about? Well, they were down on the team. They were there, but down on the team. I said, shoot, I've never booed in my life, and I'm not going to start now. They're just kids out there playing. Let's cheer for them. I said, what do you mean, cheer for them? I said, yeah, let's cheer. Every time they do something wrong, we'll stand up and do a cheer. I said, what cheer? I said, well, everybody knows 2 bits, 4 bits from high school. Let's do that. So lo and behold, they would fumble. And I'd say, okay, gang, I get 5 or 6 people sitting around me, on the count of 3. Go 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1. All for the Gators, stand up and holler. We'd all stand up. Everybody look around. They all thought we were drunk. It was really remarkable. And it kept going, and it kept building and pyramiding until it built to what it is today. When you get out there, in the middle of the field, and I hold my arms up to get quiet, and I get just absolute silence from 90,000 people. People want to know what I get out of doing this. I do not get free tickets, and I don't get free parking, and I don't get paid. Simply because I wouldn't have it any other way. If I was being paid some way, then I'd be really obligated to do what I'm doing. And what I do is from the heart.
Mr. Two Bits has cheered on many great players and coaches over the years.
Years in the making. Gridiron Gators.
We played it as hard as we possibly could, with great integrity.
He was very positive. He was great with the media. Really, the fans loved him. He was a good organizer. He hired good coaches and let them coach. And even though he was a defensive coordinator at Tech, he understood the wide open offense. That's what Tech played. They were a razzle-dazzle team. So he put that in immediately at Florida, which was a stark contrast to the 50s. So he got a lot of acceptance there quickly.
I said, we're going to play an offense that I don't want to coach against in defense. And of course, that's something that I think we started and changed the Southeastern Conference. It used to be more of an option offense in the SEC. Then I started with Liberatore and Shannon and then Spurrier. We just kind of changed the offense in the Southeastern Conference, and that's why a lot of them still hate Florida for having to maybe change their offense, and I think it was something special.
Coach Gray's philosophy was you just shock them right away. And that's the way we played back in '69, which was it's an extremely aggressive style of football, which is really what you see now as the Steve Spurrier era, where you go out there and you shock them right away in the first quarter. And of course, Steve was a player under Coach Graves, but it's the same kind of philosophy.
The biggest game in Coach Gray's young career came against highly ranked Georgia Tech, coached by the legendary Bobby Dodd. Late in the fourth quarter, the Gators were down 17-10.
To Infante, and he turns the corner just in time for a touchdown, Florida. That makes it 17-16. The players and coaches.
As it turned out, I guess that going for two was something that I didn't have any choice. But the chance to beat Georgia Tech there, I couldn't have faced the players or probably the fans if I hadn't given them a chance.
Barry Liberatore will bark out the signal. What a tense moment this is. He gets on the option plays, draws in the defense, then pitches at the last minute to John Macbeth, who's got it for the conversion that's good for 2 points.
He hit him real quick, but he juggled that ball a little, and I never forget it was John Macbeth for juggling it. So my heart went out on that play. But anyway, it was a big one, and I think it was something unusual. At that game, when the game was over, the fans in the stands got real quiet. I was really amazed. I still remember it just got quiet. I don't think the fans believed that we'd beaten Georgia Tech, and I don't think Georgia Tech fans believe we beat them either.
It was just a signature victory, and I felt like it kind of set the tone for the whole 60s.
Another game that defined the Grays era came in 1963 against the Bear in Tuscaloosa, where the longtime Alabama coaching icon had never been beaten.
We had won the week before 35-28 over Richmond, the Richmond Spiders, and they dropped a pass at our goal line that would have tied the game with seconds to go. And so it was just pitiful. Fans were just, oh my God, we got to play Alabama next week. So we go to Tuscaloosa the next week, and they're ranked third in the nation. They'd never lost, Bear Bryant had never lost in Tuscaloosa. He'd never lost a homecoming game in his career. And they had Joe Namath, the quarterback. And we go to Tuscaloosa, and of course they're big-time heavy favorites. And in the dressing room before the game, Gene Ellenson gave one of his motivational great speeches that he was so famous for, and they were so fired up when they left